Danielle Brommer is the Chief Growth Officer, and she is a partner for Lean Techniques. Danielle has over 10 years of experience in talent acquisition, business development in the tech industry, and has spent the last 5 years helping grow LT customer portfolio, build a team, and they now have 90 professional software, 90 consultants that work with them on their team. So Danielle was born and raised in Iowa, and she made her way back here in 2013 to help with the startup and local tech community. And Danielle, we are so excited to have you talk about the kind of software industry and how you have grown that and how you decided who to work with.
Yes. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. Danielle Brommer, as Christina mentioned, I am the Chief Growth Officer for Lean Techniques, Chief Growth Officer for, I guess, those that are maybe unfamiliar with the title that I made up, is really focused around both client acquisition as well as talent acquisition for Lean Techniques. Our organization is a service company, so we are providing custom solutions for enterprises and startups, specifically around software development. And my background in technology previously, or over the last decade, started out really with the talent acquisition and IT hiring, which was in high demand back in 2010 when I started, and I would say has increased significantly especially within the last 15 months, as organizations are really determining and understanding that they need to be technology companies, not just a provider of a service or a product. So that's kind of the offering that we have. And I'll dive a little bit more into the actual services that we provide and kind of how we tell our story with that. Our origin story is about a decade ago. My partners and the founders of Lean Techniques were software practitioners. They uncovered that there was I would argue, better way to deliver software in the marketplace, and really focused around what we call agile software delivery. But I'd say the underlying premise is more frequent communication, understanding who your customers are, and being able to respond to changing demand. And I would argue that as business owners, as each of you are, you recognize that as you are uncovering who your customer is, and in turn, how to sell to your customer. So we were fortunate 10 years ago to be in the community and telling the story of the benefit of agile software delivery. And somebody in the audience happened to be working with John Deere, and at the time they were in the market for really helping their IT organization become more of an engineering organization, and again, able to deliver software to their customers, knowing that not only is their tractor important to their customers, but the software and hardware that sits on that tractor is, if not as important, more important than the tractor itself. So we had the opportunity to start working with them and doing small contracts with them, and kind of in that individual consulting or management consulting space. And as a lot of the folks on the call have already mentioned, kind of getting one big client like that under your belt helps with telling the story to other prospective customers. But at the time that I joined LT, we were just about 5 years into our story. We were working with John Deere, and that was our biggest account. Now, that is a great account to have. However, there was some concern that we wouldn't be able to stay in business if for any reason we were cut from that account, or if there was a downturn in the market. And the other piece of that is our client was saying, we need more from you. And in order for us to deliver on that, that meant that they needed to have representation and support with their continued growth. And that's really where I came into the story, and helped with not only diversifying within the account, making sure that they were taken care of and satisfied as a large enterprise account. And, as a small business, you're competing with larger entities that have entire account management teams, that have a lot more resources at their disposal to service that particular customer. So I got in to help with leading some of the account management aspect there. And then the other thing that we were tasked with was diversifying our client portfolio, because we did not want to rely solely on one particular account, as mentioned. So my intent and I guess my strategy for starting to identify other customers were really around getting into the market. And what that means is I was attending every event possible that I thought somebody that has a technology need would be at. So really kind of going where you believe your market is. And it was an opportunity for me to discover what things are going on in the marketplace that would potentially be in line with what our services offerings are. How do we make sure that we are telling our story that is in line with what their needs are? We call it at LT the struggling moment, right? Or you maybe would hear how do you create a value proposition, which is really around what is my customer's problem in their words, so that you can respond accordingly to what their needs are. And so all of this networking and attending meetings and what is now more webinar focused, right, in this virtual world, was allowing me to start having conversations or connecting the dots so that we could go back and, again, kind of provide a custom, response to what their needs were. And that has changed over the last decade. I mentioned we do more of the agile software delivery when we first got started. And now we really talk about, customers' digital transformation and their journey to be able to respond better to their customer. And that content and our story internally has been able to make sure that we are staying and meeting our customers where they are today and for the future. So to identify kind of what our target customer and ideal customers were, we mentioned the enterprise account at John Deere, and then we started working with locally Principal Financial Group, Corteva, Hy-Vee, Brommer, Wellmark. So a lot of big local Iowa companies that we, again, knew had a need for the service offerings we provided around software delivery, digital transformation. And really, we said that those customers are ideal because we know that we can provide to them. We have history and experience in doing so, that we can most likely provide all three of our service offerings to them. And there's lifetime value for them, right? So it was worth our time and effort to go after those particular customers. Within those customers, we then decided who were our buyers, right? So the buyers that have historically bought our services are IT leaders, directors, executives that are really interested in not only delivering more software or products to the marketplace so that they can continue to be competitive, but those that are interested in modernizing their software delivery, meaning making sure that your legacy systems and the infrastructure you have in place are able to enable more efficiency within your organization and, again, service your customer. And so once we started identifying who those buyers were, then we went after those particular buyers, right? And the other thing that we found as we were going through and reviewing a lot of our ideal buyers and personas, as you maybe would hear in the marketplace, there was a theme that really resonated and we thought to be maybe what we would call a trigger for, we knew this was going to be somebody that was going to lead us to getting in on an account. And that theme was, the individuals that we found to be our best advocates within a client were really interested in helping make their organization a better organization. And on that journey, there is opportunity for them to potentially accelerate within their career. And so that little profile that we were identifying allowed us to start having conversations with people. And if there were things that were coming out about, them on the cusp of a promotion or, the opportunity to affect change with their team members or with their peers within the marketplace, that was a trigger for us to say, let's continue to go down this path of selling to you. The other thing that we uncovered is, especially in large enterprise accounts that I've mentioned, you have maybe a lead or an advocate or multiple leads, but there's additional stakeholders that you're selling to. So it may not just be the IT leader or director that is the buyer, but you have supply management, you have legal, you have their peers and decision makers, and whoever else is in that approval process for you to get through their gatekeeper or that process. And so you do have to keep that in mind, because I don't know how many times have gotten excited about like, this person's really interested in working with us, and find out that the legal hurdles and the paperwork required to get into an account could take months. I would argue that there are situations for us that have been sales cycle of 18 months. So there's some patience required and getting into the big accounts. But then there's also ways to navigate or find, other decision makers, not maybe other decision makers, but buyers that have found ways to maybe skirt some of those long paperwork and kind of the traditional entry point to supply management. And so in those cases, we were able to provide maybe a unique contract or a kind of an opportunity to get a foot in the door to provide services and prove out what we were capable of. And then you start to buy or earn internal advocates that will help you with the process of actually getting on maybe the larger master service agreement or the supply network. And that's been a path that we've taken as well. In those cases, we have found either advocates that are, again, in the communities that we run in the tech community specifically, or I would say too, that even some of our hires over the course of the last 5 years, we would consider maybe strategic hires that have had experience working at the organizations that we serve today. And those individuals either have a network within the customers that we serve, or have proven experience and success in software delivery and management consulting, that their name and reputation within those customers have allowed us the opportunity to compete in those customers. Christina mentioned that there's been some questions around RFPs and how to respond to them, and the most recent RFP we responded to was a 96-page RFP, which was very overwhelming and daunting. And I think myself and my partners read it and were like, we're not even going to go for this. But I think the one thing that I would say in going for it is the responses that are required and the communication that is necessary really does feed into your sales assets. And I would argue it allows you to really start thinking about, how do we tell our story? And based on all the discovery we've done in the marketplace, are we responding in such a way that is answering their problem and the best, the best that we could identify to be their problem. Our style has traditionally been a much more customized approach. So based on discovery and what your struggling moment is, we're going to respond and provide you with a custom solution, because we do understand that not every customer has the same problem. And that's, maybe the downfall of the services industry over a product, right? You do have you may have to tell a little bit of a different story based on what their particular needs are. But that I do think is a really good exercise. Recommendations for the RFP and the responses is, again, go for it, right? I know it's a lot of work. There are times where we spent hours in the evenings, really trying to co-create what our response would be, uncover, what our story is. But again, all of that has fed into, our sales assets and communication to other customers. So it's not for nothing. And it does get easier. The more that you do it, now you have material that will feed into your next response. I do mention advocates a lot, and internal advocates specifically at the customers that we work with. These folks, as I mentioned, have interest in helping their organization become a better engineering company, and they are your best bet in navigating the landscape. And quite honestly, you find that you can become an advisor to them. And so I would find myself helping, these leaders with writing statements of work and trying to figure out how they can, make a sale to their leader. We would work on multiple iterations of proposals with these internal advocates, because you have to remember that you're helping them achieve a goal, right? And that's, I think, a really powerful thing to kind of keep in your back pocket. It's a, help me help you kind of approach. And I think that's been something that has been super helpful for our continued growth. And I know this has been mentioned quite a bit on the call as well, that, it's important to leverage your community. There are several resources available to you as a business owner. And quite honestly, as a business owner, you wear a lot of hats, right? Whether that's the sales associate. I fortunately have not had to work too much on the payroll or invoicing side of the house, but there are resources to even help get on the path of what tools should we be using, and QuickBooks, and how do you create a sales template for a new sales associate if you want to hire them, and commission structures and all of that. So I would definitely recommend making sure that you are talking to people, networking, and many people are willing to help in navigating those growing and scaling issues that you're going to run into as you grow your business. And I think when I first started at LT just over 5 years ago, we were a team of 15. We are now a team of 90, as Christina mentioned. We've seen a lot of growing pains throughout that, and the selling piece is becoming a lot more. I would say it's becoming easier because we've experienced a lot of opportunity to grow. We've had a lot of no's as well, but we've been able to take that feedback and apply it to our next sale. So much of the work that we've done here is been in the state of Iowa, and kind of the marketplace that we've served because of our, again, community here in central Iowa. But one of our targets is to sell to an organization that has never heard of us. And so a lot of this foundational work we're doing, and again, kind of getting better at writing our RFPs, building up our sales collateral. We are getting better about branding some of the stuff that we're doing, and reaching communities that maybe we hadn't otherwise reached, like here today, to get our word out so that we can feel more confident in trying to go after a large account in the Midwest that, again, may not have had the privy of working with us in central Iowa. So there are a couple things I wanted to chat about, like the good, bad, ugly, that in selling enterprise accounts. For us, again, in identifying enterprise accounts as a target customer, we knew that there would be growth potential within them. We knew that there's opportunity to cross-sell, upsell. You already have a relationship within that organization, or once you get in the door, it's an easy conversation to have to say, hey, we've already worked with your peer here, or within this particular division of this larger entity. We've proven success. Now we have a reference. So those are definitely positives of getting into a large enterprise. I would also say that going after these large accounts, you get better at telling your story, as I've mentioned. You have to be able to be confident in what you're selling. You have to understand what your unique position is in the marketplace, how you differentiate yourself from competitors. We have the, I wouldn't say disadvantage, the opportunity to compete in a couple different sectors in our service industry, right? So you have your IT staffing companies, you have other software consultancies. And then in the space of management consulting, we are competing with even large Big Four entities that are, the Accentures, PwCs of the world, that are helping organizations with their digital transformation. And so we have a very large competitive landscape and a variety of different providers that we are, up against in times. And so there has to be some level of confidence to say, we know that we can actually not only help you with that strategic plan, but also deliver on it, right? And how do we tell that in a way that's still authentic to ourselves, but also something that we feel good about and know that we can deliver on? Bad. I've mentioned that sales cycle can be long. We have had, again, fortunate opportunities to have leads into organizations based on our network. But some of the companies that we've been knocking on the door with have taken a very long time to kind of get, our proposal to a place where somebody is really willing to buy. Other bad, you are selling to multiple stakeholders. So, your story to an IT leader is much different than what I would, consider a supply manager or vendor manager, right? They have a lot more boxes to check in terms of how you are going to be able to fit the need of the larger enterprise. There is a lot of contract reading when you get into doing those larger enterprises. Oftentimes, their preference is to work on their agreements. Make sure you either get familiar with reading those or have people that can review them for you, or an attorney. But it definitely, it does help to start to get more familiar with that. Not that there's going to be times where things are going to be it's more often than not that, there are agreeable terms, but you want to make sure that you are protecting yourself and your organization. And that does lead me to one of the ugly things that has come up in, contracts specifically. Early on, we were getting on the account with Pioneer at the time, or DuPont Pioneer, now Corteva. And there were some terms that were maybe things that we didn't really even think to look at, and specifically around payment terms. I think we were so excited about getting onto the account that we would be able to start doing business with them, and being one of our 18-month, I think they were even actually like 2-year sales cycle to get on. We just signed the paperwork and went on our merry way. They had 90-day payment terms. So if you think about, your standard invoice of a week or 2 weeks, sometimes even monthly in their terms, they didn't actually need to pay us for another 3 months. So when you are a small business, and at the time, we were hiring a significant amount of team members, I recall that, we finally realized that this was a term that was not favorable for us. It was too late to go back and modify a 30-page master services agreement that we'd agreed to. And we noticed our bank account dipping very low because we weren't actually receiving the funds in a timely manner. And so I recall some panic in the office that there was going to be some challenges ahead. Eventually that levels out, right? You start to see, once that trickles in, that you're going to hit more flat or a streamlined payment. But those are things that are definitely scary when you are just early on in your business and thinking, how didn't I catch that, right? But I will say now, every time we get a new MSA, we are absolutely, doing a control F, figuring out what payment terms are, what our invoicing schedule will look like, and making sure that we have that edited, or at least, something is in favor with what our billing cycle needs to be, so that we can bring in the money. In terms of like the process for us, I mentioned there's a lot of the research and discovery that's necessary to understand who your target customer is. Once you identify your target customer, identifying the leaders or buyers within your customer, and making sure that you're telling the story to all parties that would influence the decision. I will say that one thing that I think has really helped us in that process, when it gets to the next stage of writing a contract or getting to the MSA, is we have tried to be flexible with the buyers, meaning like, some of the leaders and buyers for us may not be as familiar with how to write up a contract or a work order to get it through their sourcing and vendor management team. And so how do we make sure that we are helping them with that, or writing it for them if they need to? And then in turn, we recently just had a customer that was like, wow, you're very agreeable to our terms. And as long as there are, again, kind of the basics that we've identified as, making sure we get paid, and that it's in a reasonable amount of time, we can be incredibly flexible with how we write the contract and make sure that we service you. And they were like elated that we weren't as stringent about some of those contractual agreements that were necessary. And then once the paperwork is signed, we do have to ensure that we are invoicing, we are providing budgets and things like that to ensure that our customer is satisfied with not only what we're delivering, but also making sure that we not only get timely payment, but they get timely invoices because they have a budget that they're managing on their end as well. So I would definitely recommend, if you are not familiar with how all the money and exchanges work that way, hire somebody that can to stay on top of it. Again, that's going to help with some of the challenges you will face with the money intake or revenue generation that way. It's also a heavy administrative burden. And if you are the one responsible for doing the selling and the customer account management, it is really important for you to focus on that effort and make sure that somebody has the, operations in order. So that was something that I know my partner was focused on hiring really early. It was something too that it was important for you to know enough about, right? I think it's important for you to understand where your money's coming, what your contracts look like, who's going to be paying on time and when. Those are all things that are really valuable for a business owner to understand. And especially when you're hiring somebody and maybe delegating that to them, to make sure that you still have a handle on that or a grasp on that is important.
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to jump in because we've got like 5 minutes left.
Right, that's it.
I know you've handled such massive contracts, so I am going to rattle off because you kind of told me if you are looking to work with John Deere, Corteva, Hy-Vee, Principal, Vermeer, Wellmark, those are all companies that Danielle has worked with. And again, that sales cycle of leading up to that. I do want to get to a couple quick questions here if we can. And if you have time to hang out a little past 10:30, we welcome you to stay on. But this question came on early, but it applies to every single person. It was mentioned about negotiating payment, which Danielle just talked about. Tofi talked about. They've all talked about this. What are other areas you recommend negotiating as a small business, a startup, that can help eliminate barriers? And Tofik, I'll have you answer that first.
Yeah. So, there are several different places where you can negotiate as you're starting off. Depending on what product you are, there's always somebody doing the work, right? Whether you own the manufacturing facility or you're outsourcing it to a co-packer or a core manufacturer. I think negotiating terms with them is always good. You want to have a good cycle where you order inventory and then they give you great terms like 30 days to pay them or 45 or whatever it is. And then you have better terms once you sell the product so you can get paid faster. That way you can cash flow a little bit better because the lifeblood of any manufacturing business is the float, right? And how much money you have while you're floating in between those transactions and deals. So negotiating with your manufacturer is always good. Also slotting fees too are a big one to negotiate too. So if you have a product like whether it's hardline or the CPG space, like our food products, Hy-Vee is amazing to work with, Fairway is amazing to work with locally. But once you start getting outside of Iowa and you're working like we work with Stop and Shop, for example, which is 600 stores in the Northeast, so throughout the New York, et cetera. They require slotting fees. They require you to pay for your product to get on the shelf, or they require you to give them a free fill, it's not the best practice. Their philosophy is they're giving you shelf space. You're putting your product on their shelf, so they want it for free. So in lieu of that, registering with Iowa TSB is great. It's a great opportunity to help negotiate those slotting fees, which we've used to really reduce ours down. But also we're registered nationally with some minority certifications. Like we're registered nationally with a company in New York. If you're Asian minority, it's for Asians. There's several different ethnicity groups as well as women. So trying to get out there and registering with as many different diverse groups to help get your product will always help in negotiating with your buyers. I think the biggest thing is to just get the meeting, get in there, sell your product, show them what you're made of. And then when they say, hey, we love your product. Okay, now deal with this person on getting the product on the shelf. That's when you want to come in and leverage every single aspect of your business, from your supply chain to your minority status to how you're working to get those fees. But I would negotiate wherever you can. And that's pretty much how I've been able to build my business from the ground up with taking, little to no money from anyone. So it's really trying to leverage whatever assets you have to really get out there and get your product going. So I hope that answers your question.
I do quickly want to mention, because we've got like 2 minutes left here. I did drop the next sessions in. We've talked a lot about them. So the next session is on how to register for a TSB. And we will actually have Jill Lippincott, whose name has come up several times, on how to do that. You've heard the importance of that here. Amy, I know we didn't touch on that, but you've used some of the state products as well that are available. And I know Jill's going to talk about those. Following Jill on September 23rd, we'll be selling to the government, all that stuff that Terrence talked about. We have Danielle Conley, and actually a buyer for the military bases. So I'm glad that came up. We'll be on that call with us talking about that process. And then following up kind of comes back to Danielle about how to get contract ready. We have Kathy Porter, who works on a national level, coming in to talk about how to get ready, what's expected, a lot of the stuff that Danielle touched on today. So it is 10:30 on the dot today. If anybody wants to stay on and ask a few more questions, speakers, is it okay if I drop your emails down in the chat? Is everybody okay with that? I think I asked you that before. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm going to drop those down right now if anybody wants to snag them for more specific questions. But if you have to jump off today, thank you for joining us. Otherwise, if you have questions and want to stay on, we'll stay on here for just a couple more minutes.
Awesome. And I've got some time. If anybody has any questions, just let everyone know.
Does any of our speakers also want to weigh on negotiating those terms? I had to kind of jump in quickly, but if anybody else wants to talk about things that they negotiate on those terms, that would be helpful.
One thing sorry, go ahead, Terrence.
No, Amy, you go ahead. You do your thing.
I didn't get to mention what you just said. If anybody does have looking for some startup funds, Iowa Economic Development Authority, like you mentioned, the Proof of Commercial Relevance launch funds, is a really great opportunity for some funding through the state for startup businesses.
That's great. I do have time to stay on as well, but what I was going to mention again, if for those who are kind of in this other space that's not product oriented, ask for deposits. I mean, that has been a game changer. Longer terms, less shorter project oriented work is what we started to look at for our business. And we had to also just be really good at saying no. And I may be speaking to maybe a smaller business who's scaling, but get used to saying no. Turn down small projects that just don't fit with where you are. Ask for deposits, right? We usually, in general, between 35 and 50% deposits up front. Depending in the government, that's not going to be the case. They're not going to pay deposits, right? But on the private side, that a lot of times is going to be the case, just to help upfront your costs, and that's standard in the industry. But the other part is that has also allowed us to kind of forecast and have longer term contracts. 6 months is what we tried to stick to, minimum 6 months. Sometimes we'll go down to 4, or of course we'll go higher as well. But that has been a really good thing for us, certainly when it comes to recurring revenue. But looking and asking for deposits, also negotiating. I think Danielle mentioned this. The terms, sometimes if they pay earlier, maybe giving them a 1% discount, and those kind of things off of the overall value of that contract, or for that month, at least for the invoicing side. On the government side, they a lot of times, sometimes will eat that like catnip. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're going to help save them money by them paying early inside of 10 days, hook me up, brother. You know what I mean? And here's your money. So I don't know if that helps or not, but different wages for different stages, different things for different stages of your business. So.
I did have a question that actually was emailed by somebody this week that could not be on, so I do want to ask it since we have time. It was around pricing. So it is a food item. They've set their price. Now people are wanting them to wholesale, and they will go upside down. Advice on that, Amy and Tofik, I know you guys have both dealt with that on your pricing structure. So how do they, from the beginning, set a price structure that would allow for them to be profitable and go into bigger markets?
Yeah, Amy, you want me to take this or you want to take it?
It's a food item, so you start with it
All
and
right.
I'll see what I can add on at the end.
So, general rule of thumb. So, I mean, to have a viable business in the retail world, wholesaling, you want to have, and this is a great piece of advice, is margins. You want to make sure that your profit margin on your product, once sold, whether it's third party or going direct, is at least 50% or higher. Because once you start getting deductions, billbacks, warehouse fees, you're going to see that percentage in your profit margins dip a little bit. Hopefully not, but I mean, it just depends on how things go. But typical retailers, depending on what I've experienced, like I said, this depends regionally. We have retailers down south like HEB that take almost 35 to 40% for some of their premium placements, whereas some places here in the Midwest, they only require as low as 28 to 30%. 30% has been kind of the norm. So you want to set your target price, work backwards, giving the retailer at least 30% is what I would suggest. And then if you're going through a third party distributor, whether you're going through like a Cisco, UNFI, KE, or even a Lomar, you want to factor in their percentage cost off of that, and then any promotional costs that you have. So it's kind of tricky, you know. I mean, if you're making your product for $5, you may end up selling your product for $14.99 to make sure that you ensure those 50% plus margins, because you want to have scalability, and it's always good to have scalability once your margins in-house are as high as possible. So that's kind of what I would say. I would just say make sure to really work with the retailers on that. And if it's depending on what type of product, if it's shelf stable, meaning that it has maybe a shelf life of a year or higher, you might have more opportunities there to really help and get some more scalability, where versus something that's perishable that expires in 2 weeks, because perishable products, if your product is outdated and it doesn't sell, you're going to be billed back right away. So you want to make sure to watch for those and work on your manufacturing costs. So I hope that answers that question.
You did a great job with that, Tafik. All I would add is that a lot of people price themselves out of the market, right? Right. You said at the get-go is that if your price is too high, you're never even going to get into that next step. And unfortunately, what you're going to have to do is a tier system. And so if your product costs you $1 to make it, you're going to want to, again, the 50% margins come into play. You're going to want to sell it to the wholesaler for $2. They're going to sell it for $4. And that's kind of the general theme of that. And then you're going to want to look what the market's selling for. So in your category, what is the typical price of those items? If everything typically is selling between $10 and $15, and you go in there with a $30 to $40 item, is going to be a really difficult sell for them to put on their shelves. And so you're going to have to really hustle and figure out ways that you can get that cost down, so you're not going in at a loss out of the gate. Obviously, you're going to lose money when you first launch your business because of startup expenses and whatnot, but you're going to want to look at your year, 2-year, 3-year forecast and say, okay, with mass scale, how am I able to reduce that? And what can I do initially here without reducing the quality to cut on some different expenses that is causing this item to be not profitable out the gate, and work backwards from there.
There was a follow-up question in the chat. What percentage range does distributors need?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, I mean, it really varies on how big the distributor is. We work with smaller regional distributors, such as, Davidson Specialty Foods, all the way to the national ones like United Natural Foods and KeHE. And those companies take anywhere from 30 to 35%, sometimes 20% right off your product. Plus, on top of that, some of them, and the benefit to the distributor, there are benefits. There are some pros and cons. They all have their own account managers that represent different accounts. So, for example, like United Natural Foods or KeHE may have an account manager that manages Giant Eagle, or somebody that manages Albertson, Safeway, or Vons. And their sole goal is to present products that distributor takes. Some of these representatives and these retailers, they all have different guidelines. So on top of the 20 to 35%, they may ask you for promotions every quarter. Like maybe you need to run an OI, which stands for off invoice. So in addition to taking their cut, the distributor cut, and giving the retailer a cut, some quarters we need a 10% discount so we can mark your product down. And so otherwise they won't even consider you launching the product into some places. It's a really push, give and take. I think the goal is to really grow with your distributors and get as big as possible, and then try to go direct is kind of my best piece of advice, because then you can eliminate some of those cuts. So
I did want to ask a quick question to Terrence about the RFP response. You do a lot of that too. Any advice on what you've seen kind of in that service sector?
Yeah. So thanks, Christina. I wanted to kind of mention something before I forgot about it, but I know Danielle again mentioned about the RFP process. So I will say we are small. We are growing. Originally, it was just me hustling, trying to respond to RFPs, right? And I'm like, man, how are people responding to all these big things? But I learned that two things: partner with people, find and partner with people who are great at that. Me, I'm not a great writer. I just responded to an RFP yesterday, and RFPs are not all created equal. You kind of have to also know like your weight class. You know what I'm saying? Why am I trying to go for a $2 million bid when we don't have capacity to fulfill that, nor do we have experience? Even though I can look at a project and say, oh, we could do that. Take my hubris out of it and just let's be honest about what we can and cannot do. Let me find something that I can build capacity with. And there will be RFPs where people are asking for your capabilities, what you can do. And it's really just responding with bullet points specifically in the form of a proposal. That is okay. That may be a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 job. And that's great. But you have to practice and build muscle memory and know what it feels like to win. Once you get into the practice of winning those, and okay, I did these things well. Now, okay, let me refine this. Let me add a little more graphic design, but I got my bullet points right. I got this right. I got that right. But what I would also say is, so do that. Find smaller opportunities and build muscle memory to respond to projects that you can win on. Get practice with calling people, answering the questionnaire, going through the questionnaire process. The questionnaire process, whether it's a corporation or government contracting, can be used to glean information as to what someone is looking for, or maybe what they didn't like on someone or on the same project being done previously, right? And so these are things that I've learned to say, okay, ask, what is their budget? Instead of me guessing, let me just ask them, what is your budget? Well, we don't want to go over $100,000. Now I know how to price it right. What are some things that went well that you like with the previous project? Oh, it hasn't existed before. This is all brand new. Okay, they're going to need some strategy along the way. Learn to build the muscle memory, but you have to jump out there. And if we weren't entrepreneurs, we would not be okay with risk. But I think we all are. But you have to jump out there and practice. The other thing I would say is find someone who is a good writer. There are people, if you look on LinkedIn, who specialize in responding to proposals, or if you're on the nonprofit side, responding to grants. Find a good writer or a good technical writer, and then ask them, would you be willing to help me? And then negotiate your terms, right? You can negotiate terms with the company. You can also negotiate terms for help to get to where you want to be. There are other similar companies who are looking to grow. They can't do what I can do. I can't do what they can do. But use that and leverage it, because we just don't have all the staff all the time to respond to RFPs and to have all this government contract writing and used to winning all this stuff, right? And there are people out there who cost a lot of money, and we ain't got it like that. So I just want to provide a little bit of encouragement and some insight as some different ways that people can find success in this space. The other part that Tawfiq mentioned, I love it, is leverage. You have to leverage. This is business. Business is about making money. This is not a hobby. I mean, we start off that way, but we grow, and now we have responsibilities and payroll and all this stuff. Leverage. When it comes to supplier diversity, I can appreciate his take on that. Me and him talk about some of the same organizations. We live in a society where people are right now recognizing that through systems that don't cater, we have been paying women less than their white male counterparts on the dollar professionally, right? We have been paying Blacks, minorities, less than their white male counterparts. If you are a minority woman, you kind of got a double bad, right? But when people recognize that in our society, this is why supplier systems are effective. This is why women business supplier diversity supplier strategy is effective because people want to be a part of the solution, not the problem. Make sure you understand your value proposition, but part of that value proposition is also leveraging all your assets to make sure you can put yourself in position on that RFP in those conversations to help your business to grow, whether it's minority business status, a women's business status. We're trying to even the playing field out here. And there's no reason why everybody can't be doing well in these spaces with their businesses. So leverage, and everything you can do. And when asked and when it matters, make sure you understand your value on the other side of being a women-owned business, minority-owned business, and so forth. So that's all. I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thanks, Terrence. Hey, we're going to wrap it up because we are 15 minutes past, and I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. I did drop those links to the next sessions in the chat over there, so you can actually just go directly and register. I do want to mention too, Danielle talked about the importance of building that buyer relationship. We are actually going to have a Meet the Buyer session where our buyers will actually be online via Zoom talking about their process. You will see their face, you will know their contact information, and that will be on October 19th. We have a save the date out right now. We will announce the lineup of companies that will be presenting at that soon. But if that is of interest, and Danielle can attest to that, of how that strategy has worked very well, and same with Tofik and all these guys, I know that they make that contact, build that relationship, and it makes it a lot easier to land those contracts. So thank you to our speakers today. I appreciate your time so much. It's extremely valuable. Their emails, again, are down in the bottom if you'd like to directly reach out to them about one of the companies they work with or get a little more guidance or feedback. I know that they are very giving of their time. And again, the whole session today was we did it, you can too. These are all people here, local people that are now working with national companies, and they did it and you can too. So until next time, thanks so much for being here today. We look forward to seeing you at a future event.